Welcome to the Minerals Committee. For Monday, February 13th, Capital Extension Room 4 and online to hear House Bill 190, Wyoming Value Added Energy and Industrial Plan. We'll forego the roll because we know who's here. With that, we need to give Coach Representative Harshman just a little more time. He's running down the hall. He was, and he had to break out for just a moment.
All right. Up here. Yeah, he just walked out. You walked in one door, he walked out the other door. But this is coffee and water. Please join us.
Yeah. You can sit right here.
Yeah.
You can have a little two right here. Yeah, that works out. Remember, there was a guy before here. You weren't a guy from Casper also. He was going to resign. So, I won't be here for like 16 years ago.
And here you are. Uh-oh.
This is a nice little bit.
It looks familiar.
Good thing you showed back up, Senator. The representative was about to do it too up there, take over your chair.
Oh, well, hang on here.
Careful what he asked for, right?
Yeah, that's right. Okay, let's get started. We've been waiting for Representative Harshman.
I'll look for it.
We're live and appreciate those people online patiently waiting. Let's go ahead. Representative Harshman, Wyoming Value Added Energy and Industrial Plan, House Bill 190.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate you here in the bill and the committee. We're all running late here this morning. Looks like House and Senate. We had a little bill on cigars. And we smoked for a long time, no pun intended, but well over an hour on a couple amendments. But Mr. Chairman, and I think you and I were both probably on appropriations back when this kind of initial concept about the last time we had money and we were looking at projects, and we went to Canada and we looked at some of these things and how does Wyoming move our minerals into more of this production state. And so really went back and just looked at some of the work we did, and we did some good work out of that. I mean, the Integrated Test Center in Campbell County was a result of that work. And the core sample at the University of Wyoming was part of that work. And so, and what this really does is I think we appropriated, was it 100 million last year? And with a few earmarks, but not many. And there was as much as 160 appropriated. Then I think there's some other ARPA funds as well, but 160 in the budget. It's been on both sides, so that'll go to conference for these energy initiatives. And what this bill really does is try to support. It tries to get us involved as well, primarily this committee, and to also aid in this work. And really is as much as anything, and I think Business Council said it in the House side during this same kind of hearing, was really to put more rowers in the boat. And so it's not a thing for But I think it's all about, this thing's, in my mind, it's always about group genius, right? And having more people kind of involved and more support, because when these projects come to fruition, you're going to need support from the legislative branch, and to have us involved and informed on that. So, Mr. Chairman, you can flip through the bill, or I can flip through it quickly for you if you'd like.
Just
Put a
ahead
couple
and
little-
Give us an overview.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 2, there are a couple little findings about, and really it's a positive statement about Wyoming. We've got so many blessings, and particularly how we can now move those up into the next level of production. And so it's created on page 3, this value-added energy industrial development plan, economic development industrial plan. And so 3 members from the Senate appointed by the president, 1 from this committee, and 1 from appropriations, 1 at large, similar on the House, then the same. That goes through page 3 and 4. And then, Mr. Chairman, on the bottom of page 4, it talks about what the committee shall do. And they'll elect a little co-chairman of the deal, but then it goes into all these areas about looking at deliverables for all these projects around Wyoming and coming back to the legislature with a report for us. And then, Mr. Chairman, on page 6, the governor then can also appoint some task forces. And it goes through all these ideas and can also include members of the legislature on those task forces. Could be different members or some the same members. But on page 6, paragraph A, you can see that it talks about an industrial heartland type project, and where would something like that in Wyoming go? It's not a thing where you can probably bring in thousands of workers, because we just don't have the workforce. But I think there are some really very cool opportunities, particularly in Sweetwater County, I think, and with soda ash, and I think in Campbell, of course, is something we've always thought a lot about. But so that's an interesting piece of that. And then the natural gas export, there's movement going on that all the time. I think to get our branch of government involved in that would be really important. Page 7, gas to liquid, going down to paragraph D, these electronics manufacturing, efforts and strategies on international markets on all these items on line 16. That is just continuous work. I think it's good as the legislature continues to turn over members, you keep educating members, and keep bringing folks to the table. The deepwater ports has been a thing we've talked about for at least a decade, and there is movement and on these, and so I think it's important we're involved. And then, so Mr. Chairman, and that kind of talks about all that. Over to page 9, the governor talks about basically that whole paragraph, Romanet 2 on line 15, page 9, is really about us working together. And then that continues over, can point more legislators to these task forces. Okay, and then, Mr. Chairman, just more talk about the task forces on page 10 and 11, page 12, 13. So there is an amendment that we put on that is on your engrossed version, that it's staffed by the Legislative Service Office, and that paragraph H, and then renumbered the other 2 paragraphs. Then we, Mr. Chairman, there is an appropriation, talks about for each of these little subcommittees, but then at the very end, there's an appropriation for $100,000 to the Legislative Service Office, and then the spend for this comes out of the money we've already appropriated to the governor's office. And that's up to that amount of 3.2 million. And that's a max amount. So that's the bill in a nutshell, trying to be brief, and I'm here for any questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Harshman, there was some here at the table. Senator Cooper, Senator Jones may not know what we talk about when we speak of Canada, maybe some in the room too. Just to recall that little project that was up there and we took a tour.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, and Edmonton, Alberta, there's just a classic example of taking the tar sands, the Canadian oil, and really working it through this whole production process, and through the refining process. It starts with the heaviest of the heavy, from tar and shingles to really refined products clear to the end. But it's just a massive campus of just adding value to that oil as it works through the refining process and creating products. So we toured that. It's not something that happens overnight. They didn't just build this massive campus in a matter of a few years, but it was a vision of the campus, and it starts with one project with an idea that, 10 years from now, this will be the next logical step. And I think that's the thing we all recognize in this work, and particularly the work on this committee. A lot of the work, you will never serve long enough to see the fruits of your labor. And I think about the nuclear plant, that was a project that, when we cleaned up all of our statutes and we became an agreement state status, I think it started in 2010 or 11. And so it's just all these things. And I think the beauty of this committee, you get to have that eye on the horizon, and because we've got some incredible opportunities. And so it'll be long after we're gone and long after this governor and his staff are gone. But I think as we get together and keep kind of thinking and working and building support, there's some youngsters in our body now that will be here in the decades to come as we keep kind of moving it forward.
Go ahead.
Yeah, that agreement state started with the task force, the nuclear task force that we were on in 2011, I want to say, and has been rolling ever since. And now we've got the thorium agreement state work being done, 13 years later. So some of those things take a while.
Gotta start somewhere.
Yep.
Your thoughts, Representative Harshman, on why we venture out with a separate task force versus using the two joint committees for minerals? Thoughts on that?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think that's a great question. And you're going to get your marching orders from Management Council on what you're going to work on. And I just think some of these kind of specialized things, it's hard to get, the 5 of you and the 9 House members, kind of everybody working. Everybody's just, because we're a citizen legislature, but if you can break this up and have one of you or 2 of you or 3 of you go in different directions and become, develop some expertise in areas and be able to come back and tell that story to the rest of the body on the floor of the Senate or the floor of the House, I think is really important. So I just think our committees are probably stressed enough. And I'm not a big fan of a lot of task forces, but once in a while, I think they're good to have members really dive in deep on certain issues.
And one other, and this may be a question for Mr. Luthi. We left the governor the option to create task force. Your thoughts on that, but we'll also ask Mr. Luthi. Go ahead.
Yeah, I didn't quite hear
You left an option for the governor to create individual task force. Your thoughts on that?
I did. I wanted to, again, this bill is all about cooperation and partnership. It's not about a power thing. It's about all of us on Team Wyoming rowing in the same direction. So, but I think it's so important that to have that support in the legislature, and we can come back and tell those stories and build consensus, for our state.
Thank you. Any questions, committee? Anything else? All right. Thank you. Governor's office here, Mr. Luthi, you want to jump in? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Randall Luthi. I'm Chief Energy Advisor for Governor Gordon. Appreciate the opportunity to come talk to you about this good little bill, as is often Speaker Harshman refers to his bills. And I've talked to you somewhat in generalities and some specifics. This is a bill certainly heavy on task forces. The legislative task force is completely up to the legislature where you want to end or where you would like to go. But I do indicate, as you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, the governor is given the option of appointing task forces to work with this task force. That is an option. There are some mays, but when you get to page 9, you see a lot of shalls of what the governor shall do. We're more than willing to work with the committee. We're more than willing to work with the sponsor of the bill as well as we try and attempt to move through here. Just some general observations. We do have a great working relationship with the Senate and House Joint Minerals Committee. We believe that that is a committee that we work with most frequently. You also have the Wyoming Energy Authority, you have the Wyoming Business Council, all of which are all involved within these projects, all of which can and probably would be involved in these task forces. But we're asked to put a lot of people onto task forces, and I just point out there's not any additional personnel to do it. But the goal we firmly support. We need to do more to bring added value to our state and our industries. And it's a legislative decision, whether or not we're able to do that through the existing structure that we have, or we go somewhere else. I would like to point out a couple of things, and one is the bill actually identifies several projects that the governor's task force is supposed to look at. I have asked that a couple of amendments be distributed to you that might be possible. And the first one would be one of the governor's highest priorities, and I think one of the state's highest priorities, is that we actually try and get a carbon capture facility built on a coal-fired plant, either that be coal or gas-fired plant. So I have suggested that you might want to consider amendment that while you're giving us specific projects to look at, why don't we add one as well? And I see you all looking around, which makes me a bit nervous that you may not have those.
Don't have carbon capture with this one.
Okay, well, I would not sure where it went, but it went to LSO this morning. But let me just read. It would be line 7. I'm sorry, page 7, line 13.
Okay.
After paragraph E, insert the following. The development and construction of a carbon capture facility on an existing gas or coal fired power plant in Wyoming, and scenario analysis on how best to encourage the development of and construction of these facilities. The last third of that is identical language to what's in the other projects that are identified in the bill.
Okay, very good.
And then you would create new paragraph F and put all the language that's currently in E in F. So that would be our suggestion as well.
Understood.
Now I wanted to talk a little bit about the funding. The bill proposes that we go into the governor's energy matching funds, which the legislature last year created. And I start off with energy matching funds. There would not be a match required. We would actually take it out of the original 50 million, which is currently, that's all that is currently appropriated for this. So we'd take it out of that fund and currently out of the 100 million that was currently appropriated. Currently, 18 of that is already earmarked. So we've taken the governor's matching fund down to 82.
Okay.
And that last year, the legislature gave us some pretty specific direction of how to use that. That's for the purpose of providing funds for private or federal funding for research, demonstration, pilot projects, or commercial deployment projects related to Wyoming energy needs, including but not limited to carbon capture, utilization and storage, carbon dioxide transportation, industrial carbon capture, coal refinery and hydrogen production, transportation storage, hydrogen hub development, biomass, biochar, hydropower, battery storage, or wind or solar energy. So that is the language you have given us for the governor to use as a basis of this matching fund. The current bill does not change that direction. All it does is take out of that
Right.
what remaining 82 million, which would be about 3.1 million to run the task forces. Has there been some mention that the governor is going to get a lot more? We don't know that. He did request 50 million more for this fund, but to go under the same matching requirements. The House and Senate Appropriations Committee suggested there could be another 160, but the House took that 160 out in their deliberations. The Senate took it out, then put it back in. So I think all of that is still questionable. So,
depending on that agreement and conference, we'll see what we have there.
good. Now, my simple little amendment to solve that would be, is that you take this 3.1 million out of general fund, and then leaving the governor's matching fund for the purposes for which you created it.
Okay, that might be a little challenge. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The 50 million is solid, I believe, in both budgets, though, the plus 50. So it's somewhere between 50 and 210 million is the add-on for this year. Is that accurate?
That is correct, if we don't go to a free conference committee and change a lot of things.
Right.
I'm confident.
Right?
Say that general fund amount again.
3.1,
Okay,
and I believe that is correct, Mr.
go
Speaker.
ahead.
Okay.
All right, go ahead.
So with that, I would be ready for questions, but those are our concerns and our support for such a concept.
Thank you. Committee? All right. What about this other amendment doesn't belong to you, page 7, line 8, manufacturing, advanced recycling? That's not it. It's not yours?
Must not be, because I read the one, and the other amendment that I would propose, Mr. Chairman, would be on page 13, lines 21, 23, where you change the funding source from the governor's energy matching fund to the general fund.
Chairman, that other amendment we'll hear about in public comment.
Okay. All right, any more for Mr. Luthi? All right, thank you, Randall.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Speaker Harshman.
Who else is in here that would like to testify in the room? Let's start here and then here. Both of you come on up. There's 2 mics. Go ahead, while he's working his way up, you sit down and state your name and who you're with.
Good afternoon, Chairman Dockstader Committee. I'm Sarah Dorenzo. I'm the Executive Director of the Wyoming Economic Development Association. WEDA represents over 200 economic developers, communities, and entities throughout Wyoming who work to foster economic growth and viability in the state. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this afternoon. My testimony will be brief because it just serves as an opening for my members to talk about why this effort is important for their communities in Wyoming. WEDA supports House Bill 190 because it brings an impactful added focus on economic development and diversification for 2 major industries in Wyoming, energy and tourism. WEDA sees this legislation as creating a productive mechanism with funding for Wyoming's leadership, economic developers, and energy partners to collaborate for a powerful, statewide, value-added energy plan that brings a lot of synergy to the work that's already being done. The task force structure and support effectively maximizes the expertise we have in the state and the experience and know-how to make recommendations for Wyoming. We recognize that the timeline laid out for these projects is aggressive and comes with clearly defined projects, but we're supportive of any flexibility that you can offer agencies in the governor's office to leverage these task forces on projects recommended by both. Wyoming Economic Development Association stands as a resource for this committee and the select committee who can recommend economic developers and resources to state lawmakers that you can rely on. Thank you for this work.
Sarah, I'm assuming that your membership is all across the state, and this is all kind of a broad approach to begin with. What might be a couple of examples that your membership could benefit from if we got this thing rolling?
Sure, Chairman Dockstader, committee. I would leave that to my members who are going to testify, and they'll bring up some specific projects and could talk about that more clearly.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Committee, for Sarah? Anything? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, sir, state your name.
Hello, Mr. Chairman. My name is Sean Murphy. I am in support of this bill. It's a great little bill, or whatever the term is we're using to describe it, but I think it's missing one big piece of economic development that I hope we are going to look at in terms of energy development in the state, and that's around, we could call it Bitcoin mining, digital computing, data centers. We've had a lot of success here in Laramie County with Microsoft and energy use with Microsoft data centers, but we have really struggled with this committee. And I testified last year on this issue with finding a way to have deregulated power zones. That went down in a blaze of no glory. And I think we have a great chance to make this really good bill even better by adding this section. And just by way of example is we had last year, Black Hills did an RFP, and Black Hills is doing great work in this area. They are wonderful to work with. They put out an RFP, or excuse me, a request for proposal for Bitcoin mining companies to use energy. We won the proposal, Bison Blockchain, the company that I'm with, and we beat out 15 other companies. Many of these were Chinese, some were from Taiwan, some were all over the world. But there was over a gigawatt of power that companies were asking and wanting to come use in Wyoming in this RFP process, just in this county, just in Laramie County with this RFP. So we're totally missing the boat on this. It's almost impossible for a company to come here into Wyoming and to have a large energy contract with our utility providers. They are like oligarchs. Black Hills is not like one of the oligarchs. They've been wonderful to work with, but we've had a demand for power. There's a huge economic development opportunity here, and we keep jumbling it up. And Representative Harshman mentioned the youngsters in the room. I'm one of those youngsters, and I keep seeing this happening. And last year with this committee, we brought up Bitcoin mining, and we had several senators that did not even know what it was. So how are we going to even have an intelligible task force on this if we don't even know what this is and the scale of this opportunity, because we're missing it? This won't be around forever. These companies are choosing other places to go, other energy to consume. So I would propose having an amendment here to add one of these sub-task force or a group to look at energy consumption around digital mining and digital computing specific to energy. And the idea that this all goes through the Energy Commission, that has been the idea to date, that they're the judge and jury on this, but that has failed us in Wyoming. They have their laws to follow and their opinions on this, but it's not bringing in businesses. It's not helping spur economic development. So I think we need to take a stronger approach and bring in industry to help guide this, not just the established literal power brokers in the state on this issue. So on and in support of this bill to help get us there.
This is probably an area for you to address.
I'll just say thank you. I appreciate all of his participation over the last couple of years in those large power consuming project discussions and the support for the committee work that we had. It was disappointing to have that bill go down. And I do think it's an appropriate topic to include for consideration, is effectively any large power consuming project where we know that we have struggles once we start needing an awful lot of power in the state of Wyoming. Thank you.
John, I do have a question if nobody else does. Seems like I'm associated with a co-op out west, not anything as big as what you're just mentioning. Used to have the data mining questions show up almost every board meeting saying we have inquiries because our power is so cheap. We don't hear that anymore. What's changing?
Well, one thing that has changed is a lot of these companies went to Texas, where they have a deregulated power industry. We missed the first wave of opportunities, but it's still there, and I think it will be there for the next 5 to 10 years. But beyond that, These companies, they set up large industrial sites. Microsoft sites here, 50 megawatts. Our site, first site, 45 megawatts of power. These are large-scale energy consumption projects. And just in terms of sales tax, think about that. That's 5% to the state. That's what we're talking about in terms of economic development, and the win for the state is the sales tax that comes with these large-scale power deals. And we're just not competing for them. We're losing them to Texas right away, and we're also losing some to Georgia, but that's because they have easily available excess power, and a lot of that's their nuclear industry.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Sean? Really not. Thank you, sir. Appreciate you
Thank you.
coming. Thank you for speaking. Okay, go ahead and identify yourself.
And Chairman Dockstetter, I will answer those questions that you asked Sarah once I'm done testifying, so with your permission. Good afternoon, Chairman Dockstetter and Minerals Committee members. I'm Betsy Hale. I'm the CEO of Cheyenne Leads. Cheyenne Leads is Cheyenne and Laramie County's nonprofit economic development corporation. Since 1986, Cheyenne Leads has championed economic diversification in Wyoming through the development of 2 Cheyenne Leads business parks and partnerships with the private sector on 3 other business parks. In 2021, we had a return on investment study. You should have a copy of this in your email as well as on the dais there. The return on investment study clearly demonstrated that financial investment in land and infrastructure for the purpose of economic development makes dollars and cents. The University of Wyoming reported that for every dollar invested in the business parks, that's the land and the infrastructure, nearly $6 has returned to the Wyoming economy annually. The 11 businesses which have received shovel-ready land for free or at discounted prices bring $213 million in gross domestic product or economic churn to the state annually. Those companies are the home of over 1,700 jobs and an annual payroll of $124 million. Currently, there are 2 data centers under construction. Wright McGill Eagle Claw broke ground 3 weeks ago, and Ulrich Manufacturing will break ground this spring. The capital investment for those 4 projects is well over $2 billion. Cheyenne Leads strongly supports House Bill 190 as it will offer the state of Wyoming the opportunity to develop a statewide strategy, implementation plans, and projects offering economic diversification, not only in the energy sector, but manufacturing as well. House Bill 190 provides a strong and thoughtful framework for the development of research and data that will guide the select committee task forces and the governor's office with a roadmap for deliberate and intentional work to grow the economy. House Bill 190 also offers the Wyoming Business Council, Wyoming Energy Authority, the private sector, the governor's office, local communities such as Cheyenne Leads, and their economic developers the chance to collaborate and leverage existing efforts such as the Pathways to Prosperity, the Wyoming Innovation Partnership, the Wyoming Business Council's Wyoming Academy, the Wyoming Energy Authority's Regional Economic Coordination Office, and the important work of Wyoming Workforce Services. The Cheyenne Leads board and staff applaud the state legislature, the governor's office, the Business Council, the Wyoming Energy Authority, and the University of Wyoming for continuing to work together to grow Wyoming's global dominance in our legacy fuels while embracing the future for all of Wyoming. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of this important effort, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Betsy, and came out and toured last fall and went to several sites where Cheyenne Leads based or connected to. It seemed like everything that you had touched had been successful. Is that a true story?
Yeah, thank you. So I do want to answer the question that you asked, Sarah. One of the things that I think is most intriguing right now is looking at the work that the Energy Authority has done around hydrogen and nuclear, and also the great work that's going on in Kemmerer. But we also have those projects, the helium project. There are also some opportunities. I think the project that Mr. Luthi spoke of, adding that CCUS project is really appropriate, especially when we look at how do we continue to prop up the utilization of our power stations that might be going away. Nuclear with the microreactor industry, the list is long, but certainly what you have contained within this House Bill 190 is definitely the direction that we see the Wyoming all of the above energy strategy going.
Thank you. Questions for Betsy? Thank you. Micronuclear, we've even had those presentations for our little member owned crop.
Yeah, so, and Mr. Chair, if you will, we do have the High West Energy powering up a 10 megawatt mining facility in Pine Bluffs. And we also have a new, Kryptonite will be bringing a new mining facility online on another High West substation in the Archer Events Complex. And then, of course, we have Project Bison in the North Range Business Park.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Appreciate it. Thank you. Bob, come on up. You have company. You can both come up if you'd like. Start with you, Mr. Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name's Bob Jensen. I'm here on behalf of the Alliance of Wyoming Manufacturers. It's a small group of manufacturers in the state that are focused on growing and diversifying our economy in the manufacturing sector. I think it's important for us to understand what really drives these unique and significant opportunities that we have coming to the state in the energy sector. Tremendous economic potentials here and economic diversification opportunities for manufacturing and other industries in the state, all driven by market opportunities that are out of our control as a legislature or as a governor's office, or really any government per se. These are market opportunities that it's important that the private sector take the lead in, and that is actually happening. And you're probably aware of all of the private sector companies that are moving on many of these opportunities in the state already. And so it's really important. This bill will help with that from the standpoint of it being another support mechanism for the private sector to take advantage of these new opportunities. The opportunities are already, again, being worked on all fronts that are mentioned in this bill, and some of the ones that have been mentioned in previous testimony. It's important also, I think, to understand that there, as a previous testifier said, there's a lot of support mechanisms out there now. The Energy Authority, Business Council, but there's a dozen of entities and programs that are involved in trying to facilitate the private sector to move this. I think it's really important that we understand the private sector moves faster than government. There's no question about that. And being able to not get in the way of that, I think, is an important thing to keep in mind on any piece of legislation that goes forth. If it's intended to be supportive, let's make it a supportive effort to do that. And an example of that might be some testimony was given about the possibility of the power zones. I can't remember the name of the bill, but thank you. That's an important concept, and there's a hearing on Thursday at the Public Service Commission that deals with the potential of having third-party self-generation provided to large users of power behind the meter, and allows them to have the ability to at least have that option to use that if it makes sense for them economically. So that's a step in the right direction of getting a government out of the way of the ability to have these companies locate here potentially and have an option to provide their own power, or have another company provide that power in a cost-effective way. So I guess the final statement I'll make is this is a good bill from the standpoint that it demonstrates that the legislature, the governor's office, who are already supportive, are reinforcing that support going forward. But don't slow the private sector down. It's already moving at a fast pace. With that, I'll take any questions.
Mr. Jensen, do you see anything in this piece of legislation that hinders private sector? I see that it helps. Is there anything we're missing?
Well, there's a lot of task forces.
Yeah.
I think that's great
But you
from the
were-
standpoint
But
of
you're saying you have private sector ready to go now.
the private sector is already moving really fast on these things. And I just don't want to see a task force slow it down, to be blunt.
Understood. Get out of the way and let us do business.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Committee, anything? All right, thank you. Go ahead.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, Jason Bagger here today on behalf of the American Chemistry Council. They are a national trade association with 190 members, doing over $500 billion a year in sales, and specifically in Wyoming, they have 8 members. So one of their big initiatives that they're working actually in all states right now is with regards to advanced recycling. And the amendment you, I guess, mentioned earlier, I'll go into that a little bit, but is to try to take a look at that. What advanced recycling is if you look at, say, the bottom of a water bottle or a soda bottle or something like that, there's numbers on there. And if you go through numbers 3 and 4, those plastics can be pretty easily recycled through kind of a thermal process. You kind of melt it down, remold it into something else. The problem that you run into is certain other types of plastics like cellophane and food wrappers and other numbers that honestly just get landfilled. Yeah, but what you can do with those and the new technologies that have come out is you can actually gasify that and break it down into its basic chemical compositions into a syngas that can then be reused in a lot of other processes. But in order to actually have that type of facility, states need to update their statutes. And actually, when the committee starts talking about interim topics, we'll be bringing that up as well. But this bill also could be another avenue to take a look at that, as this type of process actually co-locates really well with things like coal gasification or biomass gasification and a larger sort of industrial complex concept that you're talking about as well. So what the amendment is on page 7, line 8, just asked to insert advanced recycling into that definition. And we feel that that could help kind of spur that conversation and discussion a little bit more in the state as these types of projects and new technologies are being deployed around the country.
Thank you. Quick committee matters? Questions? All right, thank you, Jason. Appreciate it. Anybody else would like to testify? All right, anybody online? We've got Eric Bingham, Sweetwater Land Use Department. Phil Christopherson, Energy Capital Economic Development. Mr. Christopherson, are you there? Go ahead, sir. State your name and where you're from. You hear us okay, Mr. Christopherson?
Oh, I can hear you now.
Yeah. you're up.
Yes,
Go ahead.
thank you for having me. I'm
State-
glad I could be on here.
State-
Wish I could be in person.
State your name and where you're from.
I am Phil Christopherson. I'm the board president of the Wyoming Economic Development Association. I'm also the chief executive officer of Energy Capital Economic Development. My comments will be brief, but basically I want to say I support this idea and congratulate this committee on taking an active step to help diversify and expand Wyoming's economy. The partners you've listed, the Wyoming Business Council, Wyoming Energy Authority, University of Wyoming School of Energy Resources, and many others in this legislation are critical, and they have all been engaged in building and diversifying our economy, and I'm proud to work with all of them. On this effort going forward, I have one concern and a few ideas to add to the list of tasks found in the legislation. Representative Harshman clearly stated that this is a long-term effort. This is a large task that you're taking on with a very short timeline. I support and encourage the ideas and the intent behind the effort. However, I am concerned that the effort may be overambitious given the short timeline allowed. Having led and been involved in multiple value-added coal-to-products projects, I know that they can be very complex. They take a significant amount of time and resources to move forward. There are many setbacks along the way, and projects fail more than they succeed. I hope there is a high tolerance for setbacks and continued support as this moves forward. The state's role in this should be to encourage, assist, and facilitate private sector businesses in their pursuits. By facilitate, I specifically mean bring funding and resources to projects, including assisting in development of business and industrial parks for these types of businesses to locate. There are 3 items not addressed in the proposed legislation that I would like to see added to the legislation and the items for the task force to address. First, identify and become familiar with the current value-added projects in the state. Bring attention and support to existing efforts. If a project is already underway and has support, additional support and attention can help and will help. It'll be more successful to work with ongoing projects rather than to try to start new projects. We have a number of those projects up here in Campbell County. They're making good progress. The Integrated Test Center, the Wyoming Innovation Center, the work going on at Atlas Carbon, the University of Wyoming School of Energy Resource projects are all making good progress. They should continue to be supported. I would hope that when these task forces are assembled, they will go out and find out what's going on and become familiar with those projects. Another thing that we've run into working with value-added projects is finding a place for them to go for their scaled up and commercial operations. Some of the best places to locate these large industrial projects are in locations that already exist and are currently being utilized for other purposes. I'm speaking of existing mine and industrial sites. These sites can be easily developed into industrial parks for future value-added businesses. These sites already have the needed infrastructure such as buildings, roads, water, sewer, rail, and so on. These sites need to be transitioned from their current use as mine industrial sites or other sites where LNG projects, electronic manufacturers, hydrogen, and much more can be accomplished. This may take some legislation, rules, or innovative ideas providing liability or bonding relief for the companies that currently own and control those sites. And my last point is not coming from WIDA, and it's not coming from Energy Capital Economic Development, but it's coming from me as a private citizen who cares deeply about Wyoming. I have watched over the past many years the boom-bust cycle, where some years the legislature has no money to work with and they're scrambling to find money to pave roads and do the work that needs to be done. And other years, such as this one, they have a surplus and they put money away in savings, which is a good thing to do. But the problem is that we do not have a stable revenue stream for the state. I would suggest that there's one potential solution, that as we go forward creating value-added businesses and encouraging those, that we develop a revenue stream based on the value added to the products. There are very few value-added manufacturers in Wyoming right now. Thus, adding a value-added revenue generation should not have a large impact on existing business. However, if this proposed task force is successful, then in the future, there will be significant value-added businesses in Wyoming. One current example of why this is a good mechanism for balancing state revenue is an existing Wyoming business. It utilizes coal as its raw material. They take 4 tons of coal, costing $30 to $50, and manufacture a product that sells for over $1,000 per ton. Wyoming currently receives revenue based on that $30 to $50 in coal, and nothing on the value added. The time to implement a revenue model such as this is before we have a lot of value-added businesses. In my conversations with many business leaders, they want to know what the playing field is, what their obligations are when they come to the state. They're very wary of coming to Wyoming, to a state where the revenue model may be based on their business. We're currently based on minerals industry. If a manufacturer of XYZ products comes, they're concerned that the next revenue base model is going to be on their business. They would prefer to come knowing what is expected of them rather than hoping that their industry is not the next minerals industry supporting the state. investigate a value-added revenue model for the state to diversify the state's revenue as a part of this effort. Thank you for your time, for allowing me to speak. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Christopherson. I got your second title, Energy Capital Economic Development. What was your first title?
I'm the board president of the Wyoming Economic Development Association.
Thank you. Committee members, questions? It's not. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Wisdom on that third note. Thank you. Okay. All right, anybody else online? Anyone else in the room? Committee, what's your pleasure with this? Moved, seconded by Jones. Okay. Let's go over the bill, see where you want to put in those amendments. Page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Page 4. Page 5. Page 6. Page 7, there's an amendment. F, anybody want to move that? I'll move it. And we'll get Randall to give us the language to you, okay? I just penciled it in. All right, anybody want to second that amendment? Okay, it's moved and seconded. Thank you, Randall. If you'd make sure our staff gets that. I will. Page 8. Page 9. Page 10. Page 11. Page 12. Page 13, thoughts on changing things to general fund at the bottom of page, section 3. Mr. Chairman. Go ahead.
I think that's the surest way to kill the bill.
That's what I was thinking, but I'm open. Okay. We'll leave it out. Sorry, Mr. Luthi. Page 14, page 15, page 16, page 17. Thank you. General fund is a tricky thing to work with these days. Go ahead.
I would just say, Mr. Luthi expressed some concern about the shalls, and I have absolutely no problem personally of going back through and changing a bunch of those shalls to mays and putting that into a form that the executive branch is comfortable with. I took a quick look at it, and it was not a simple 2-minute task, so I guess I would invite the governor's office to come back to us, assuming that we pass this on committee of the whole or
Okay.
second reading,
Could we have-
to remedy that.
we
I
have
think
to
it's
do that?
perfectly reasonable,
Yeah.
but I'm not able to do that on the fly.
Sure. Do that. Help us out with that floor amendment. Thank you. Too many task force. I think we'll live with it for now, so go ahead. You want to get value added?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a bit of brief discussion on the advanced recycling possible amendment. Any thoughts on how we can bring this run into recycling of our turbine blades, wind blades? And you know, that's an area that we really need to consider. And I don't know why that couldn't be part of advanced recycling.
Construction of electronics manufacturing advanced recycling facilities. You want to insert something in there that specifically notes that, or just maybe it'll be caught?
I don't know that we'd have to physically note that. I think it would be, I think it'd be pretty easy to incorporate it. I don't know if it's somewhere we can get to or not.
Do you want to move the amendment then, page 7, line 8?
Yeah, I'd move the amendment, page 7, line 8,
All right,
as stated.
second?
I'll second.
Discussion,
Good for discussion.
Mr. Chairman, but at the same time, I like the concept. I don't like the amendment of where it's being put. And I think there's a few other things that could probably go in there. We talked about, large-scale energy projects, things along those lines. So when we're enumerating a list of possible opportunities, I think it is a great idea for us to think through the list, but there isn't a lot of commonality between the construction of electronics manufacturing and an advanced recycling facility, whether it's wind turbine blades or anything else. So I don't see those two as meshing. The advanced recycling actually does mesh more with petrochemical synthesis type things. It belongs elsewhere. So while amenable to this and certainly to Senator Cooper's concept. I don't think that's the right place for it. Again, it might be worthwhile for us to think through a few more laundry list items and to clean up some of the lists that currently exist on a further reading so that we can incorporate the suggestions that we've heard and the proposals. I think, large scale or large energy consumption projects, anything along those lines would be a good thing to incorporate as well.
Mr. Chairman, I withdraw that motion for right now.
Okay. Friendly amendment withdrawn. Any other amendments? Before we go back to that, let's check in with the prime sponsor. Anything else you'd like to say?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Appreciate your time today and appreciate all the folks who are testified. And I think when you look at those shalls, the part where they're shalls they're very nice shalls. And particularly on how the task force operates and those kind of things. I'm always very cautious of putting shalls in bills, and these I took some out in the drafting of this. This was more about the shall appoint a chairman of the task force. I guess you wouldn't have to. So that was where those are, and so I think they're the kinder, gentler shalls, but they could certainly be made. Doesn't change the intent of the bill, really.
Representative Harshman, I'm good with a shall. I'm ready to move forward with this. Can I ask you, what was kind of the thought over on the House side summary? Did you feel like you had some support there? People caught on, they understood the concept?
I didn't look at the digest, but I think it passed with good support, a lot of support. And I think absolutely, and through House Minerals too as well. And, this is all, part of this thing is, it's not even what we do, but it's what we say is important. And I think the tone that we set, that our eyes are on the horizon, the sun's going to come up, this is the future. And we've got really incredible possibilities. And that's part of that. And then it gets, so that's the part, all the above, working together. And really for us as the legislative branch who come all across the state, represent the entire state, that, reinforces our support. The executive branch, all of us, we're working for Wyoming on this. So that's really a big part of it. And then I think, now we have 93 type A IDEA machines. And I think that's good. I think Group Genius is good. And so I don't worry at all. It's not to slow anything down or add a layer of bureaucracy. We're not all wired like that. We're one to think and smile and do and help and get this thing going for the future.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I felt that back when we chased up to Canada, and things kind of fell apart financially for a while, and then we ran through COVID, but it's time to bring it back.
But you know what, and Mr. Chairman, though, and I think, look at the integrated test center. I think it's been, and I just think we're just getting started really, but it's been really huge. And I think the core sample is another huge part, and all the work we've done with School of Energy Resources, incredible. So,
things have developed since then.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, committee, ready for the vote? Anybody?
Just briefly, I was on the previous incarnation of this in 2014, 15, and 16. I thought it was useful then. I think it did great work. It did effectively form the foundation of a lot of the things that we've been passing over the last few years. And I think it is high time to put it together again. So I'm in support of legislation. And there's plenty of opportunity to maybe expand and look into other areas, but it's certainly written broadly enough that we can do just about anything that we determine is in the best interest of the state.
Senator Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this is going to be a very dynamic project. It's going to be constantly changing as we're going through it. It's going to grow, it's going to shrink. But what's most important is that it gets the opportunity to be dynamic. As Representative Harshman was saying about the future, us old men plant trees, no one will never sit in the shade. And this is one of those trees.
That's wisdom. Thank you. Senator Jones? Okay. All right. Take roll.
Senator Cooper,
Aye.
Senator Ellis, absentee vote.
Yeah, she was an aye, yeah. Thank you.
Senator Jones. Aye. Senator Rufus,
Aye.
Chairman Dockstader.
Aye. Thank you. Senator Cooper, how would you feel about getting started with this? Then a couple of us offer backup as we go through. It's a thick bill, or do you want to, what's your thoughts on that?
It's a pretty complex thing, sir. I'm not sure I'm experienced enough, but I'll give it a
Starting,
try.
And all of us would jump in and maybe take a section. Your thoughts on that, Senator Rufus?
I'm here to help, however anyone needs. I can certainly support Senator Cooper.
All right, and we'll bring in Senator Ellis, Senator Jones to kind of kick it off, and we'll just jump in just about that before we go to the floor. Thank you, Representative Harsh. Concludes our meeting for today.